Hey guys, Chris here with the Good Old Gamer, and I just finished watching Mark Cerny talk about the PS5 for about an hour, and not the best presentation in the world, but we finally do have hard information on what to expect from the PlayStation 5. Now, if you haven't seen this video right here where I go over all of the specs of the Xbox One X, that one I get very technical because Digital Foundry kind of broke the news to everybody, and they broke down the tech specs very nicely. Now, Mark Cerny, he did some tech spec stuff, but not a lot of it. So I'm going to go ahead and basically just do this as more of an opinion piece and talk about the information that we've been given here, because I think it's more the approach or the way that he presented this came off a certain way to me. And that's what I want to talk about with you guys here today. So to start off, Microsoft's been very bullish with their Xbox Series X. They've been showing us images for months now, and Phil Spencer went ahead and put the die shot on his Twitter account, I believe. And I mean, they've been leaking information basically every couple of weeks. They've been very bullish about it, and Sony has been very bearish. They haven't been giving us much information. They gave us a logo. It just really doesn't seem like Sony's all that enthusiastic about the PS5, and that is actually my takeaway from the presentation today. Mark Cerny did not seem very enthusiastic about this piece of technology. And I'm going to go over a few of the key features that he did seem enthusiastic about, and then really big stuff that he basically said, it's not that big of a deal. So the SSD took up a large portion of his presentation, and I think that's because their SSD that Sony is using is better than the one that's Microsoft's using in their Xbox Series X. This is the only component where Sony has an advantage. They do have a higher bandwidth SSD. Now, a lot of people out there were very excited that, Sony, usually you can upgrade your own hardware, your own storage with off-the-shelf components. And this is a real drawback because the SSD has to meet certain specs, certain standards, certain height, certain everything. You can't just go out and buy any NVMe SSD and use it in your PS5. There's going to be a compatibility list, and those are going to be the only models that you can use. And this is one of the reasons why I think Microsoft going with their proprietary external solution, basically you just slap in a memory card and it works and it upgrades your storage, I think for this type of ecosystem is actually the better solution. Instead of being like, okay, you have to buy this exact model of this NVMe, otherwise it won't work, that'll confuse a lot of people. You have to open up your PlayStation. I don't think that this is the right way to go. I like the way that Microsoft's doing this. As a general consumer, will have trouble picking the right drive and installing it inside of their system. Now, for me or you as computer people, it'd be fine. We'll just go to their compatibility list and buy one. But I think that that's a real drawback there. And the fact that they're going with very specific numbers, like you have to have over 5.5 gigabytes per second, PCIe Gen 4, those are very, very expensive as well. So this is one area where I think Microsoft cut back. They went with a little bit cheaper drives, and Sony's pushing it to the limit, which may result in slightly better loading times. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's really going to affect gameplay as much as people think. NVMEs are still too slow to be used as like virtual memory. They're not anywhere near as fast as the GDDR6, so you can't store game data in the NVMe and just stream it in. It will cause stutter. You need all of your game data in RAM. Now, they do have decompressors. Both Sony and Microsoft do have special decompressor chips in there to help out with this. But at the same time, the SSD, I think, is probably not that important, but this is what they chose to spend a lot of time on in their presentation. Mark did not want to talk about ray tracing. Every time he brought it up, he said, you don't have to use it, which tells me that it's going to be some sort of feature that developers may want to use, but he wants to emphasize that you don't need to use it. And this is likely due to the fact that the GPU in the PS5 only has 36 CUs. And as we know, RDNA 2 is going to use the actual CUs to calculate ray tracing. So the more CUs you have, the better ray tracing capabilities you have. It's that simple. Having lower CUs at higher frequency is not going to make up the lack of CUs in GPUs for ray tracing. Now, Mark did go into the fact that the PS5, they wanted to target higher clock speeds of their GPUs and CPUs and stuff because technically it's more efficient because it does rising tide lifts all boats. Basically, the entirety of the GPU does get faster. That does make sense, but like I said, when it comes to ray tracing specifically, having less CUs is going to be detrimental. Even if you have the same teraflops, lower CU count will probably have a negative effect when it comes to ray tracing, and that's why I think he wanted to downplay it. But he downplayed it himself. It was really kind of disturbing because Microsoft, at least with Digital Foundry, they gave them that Minecraft demo to show. I'm actually going to pop that up here so you guys can see that a little bit. They're obviously embracing ray tracing, and the reason for that is probably because they know their hardware is going to be far more capable at it than the Sony PlayStation 5. So the next big difference between Sony and Microsoft is their approach to clock speeds. Sony is going for boost clocks, and Microsoft is setting hard limits. And honestly, Microsoft's approach on this is going to be better. So Sony can hit higher targets, so their GPU will cap out at 2.25 gigahertz, which is really, really crazy, but that's its max boost speed, and their CPU will cap out at 3.5 gigahertz, that's max boost. Now, basically the way that it's going to work is if a game requires higher CPU usage, obviously the GPU is going to have to downclock, and so on and so forth. The power target is set between the two, and then just how fast each instance will go just depends on game load. So those are the numbers that he said you should see most of the time. But when it comes to boost clocks, remember, consoles last 5, 7, 10, even 12 years. People keep these things forever and use them 20 or 30 years later on. One of the big things is as time goes on, the thermal paste between the CPU and the heatsink will eventually break down and degrade, which means that over time, you're actually going to get lower and lower clocks. Or if you use your console for hours on end. I know there's people out there that game, 5-6 hours at a shot. That's eventually going to have some issues. Heat's going to eventually play into this because the hotter the chip gets, the less efficient the chip gets. That's just the way it goes. Gamers Nexus has done tons of videos on this. So the cooler you can keep the chip, the more efficient it will actually be. So over time, those clock speeds are actually going to go down, which means if you get a game at launch, 5 or 10 years later, that game is actually going to perform worse on your system. With Microsoft's system it runs at 3.6 gigahertz with SMT on the CPU, and the GPU runs at 1825 megahertz. No matter what, no matter how hot it gets, it'll actually blow up your system before it throttles down. There is no throttling down. So the same performance you get day one, you will have 20 years in the future. So this I don't think is a really good idea for them, but I think they need that extra boost clocks for advertising to go ahead and say that they have 10.3 teraflops of performance, whereas in reality, it's probably going to scale back and be closer to that 9.7 teraflops that we've thought for a while now. So overall, that's probably going to be a more realistic number. At the end of the day, no matter which way you slice it, the Xbox Series X GPU-wise is 20 to 30% more powerful. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's the same as going from like a 2070 Super to a 2080 Ti. That's the difference in performance that we're talking about here. And I don't think that there's anybody out there that'll say, that's not that big of a jump. It's a pretty sizable jump there in performance. And like I said, it seems like the ray tracing capabilities of the Xbox might be substantially better with its 52 CUs versus the 36 of the PS5. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is backwards compatibility. And it looks like the leak that we had a while ago where the PS5 will actually downclock itself to match PS5 Pro or PS4 Pro and PS4 base for those older games is the way that they're going to go. That's just the way that Mark seemed to present it, which says to me that, yes, your PS4 games will work fine on the PS5, but you're not going to get any enhancements. The CPU and GPU will just downclock and go into what he called a backwards compatibility mode. So that means you're not going to be running your PS4 games at 4K. This is in contrast to what Microsoft's doing, where they're going to go ahead and up-res a lot of their games and in the games library. Now, those do require some sort of hands-on tweaking by Microsoft's backwards compatibility team, but the individual developers do not have to be involved. So Microsoft themselves will pick and choose which games they want to up-res, and it's probably going to be the most popular titles or, the big titles of the console. So what that says to me is if you want to continue to play current-gen games on your next-gen console, it's going to be better on Series X because they'll go ahead and get the resolution running at 4K. So instead of running your PS4 game at 1080p on your 4K display, Microsoft will be running it at 4K. So that is a significant advantage, and there was no mention of PS3, PS2, or PS1 backwards compatibility. Looks like this is something that they scrapped, at least for now. Maybe they'll bring it in later. PS3 emulation is very difficult, even with a Zen 2 RDNA 2 combination. But at the same time, they didn't mention it here, and that was the only factor that would get me to buy a PS5. I need a way to play my PS3 games at 4K with a better controller on a more modern system. And that's the only thing that I care about from Sony, because modern games, they're going to run best on PC. PS3 games are locked to the PS3. I need a better way to play PS3 exclusive games. Either bring them to PC if you don't want to go ahead and add backwards compatibility, Sony, or please, let's get something going here, because that was the key thing for me, and they didn't bring it up in this presentation. So honestly, that's the biggest disappointment for me personally. So my overall thoughts on the situation is Microsoft is definitely much happier with their position this generation. They're very happy with where their console's at in terms of specs and capabilities, and they want to share it, and they know it. That's why they've been sharing. Sony's only really happy with their SSD performance because it's faster, but when everything else is slower, it's not going to make any difference. And honestly, developers are going to target whoever's got the slower components. So they're going to target everything to run on the Xbox's SSD and basically not utilize the PS4's extra capabilities. Only first-party developers really will. It's just like the extra GPU horsepower on the Xbox. That's not really going to matter that much. Everybody's going to target the PS5 and then just scale it up a little bit, much like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox Series X. Now, the big one is the hardware-accelerated ray tracing. Anybody out there wanting to make ray-traced games for consoles, they're actually going to target the Xbox first and then try to scale it down to the PS4. And this is the reason why I think Mark was like, you don't have to use ray tracing. So they may just opt not to use ray tracing on the PS5 version if it's just not capable enough to run the games well. And that's the real game changer. And if that is the case, and let's say ray tracing does become the next big thing, like NVIDIA's been saying for a while now, and most of the internet is very interested to see where ray tracing goes. So I do believe it is the next big thing. If Sony's machine can't compete on that front, and if they have to release non-ray traced versions for the PS5, Sony is going to lose a lot this generation, because it's not the teraflops. Nobody cares about SSDs and load speeds that much. What people care about is next generation graphics. You both have next generation audio and that 3D positional stuff, so that's a wash. The SSDs, they're going to be multiple times faster, many times faster than what we currently have on both systems. So everybody's going to be happy with either one. The biggest thing is going to be next generation graphics. And like I said, it looks like Microsoft is the one that's going to be pushing that. Sony's going to be trying to push VR, which honestly is never really going to get very big. It just isn't. It's going to be a niche. There's going to be a few, maybe 100,000 people in the world that use it, but that's it. It's never going to hit millions and millions of users. Even if it was free, it's just not something that people want to do. I've seen people turn down free demonstrations. It's like, hey, have you ever tried VR? No. You want to just try it out for free? Nah, not interested. People don't want it. People want better graphics. They want better games, and that's about it. And it looks like Microsoft's going to hit it out of the park. They have the hardware that's capable of doing it. Sony, just by the demeanor of Mark Cerny, he was not that confident in it. So that, to me, is the true story here. He's not confident in what he needs to be confident in. He's confident in the SSD speeds, which are super impressive, but it's going to be super restrictive and confusing for the user to upgrade. Microsoft did the smart thing, go a little bit cheaper there and make it super easy. Yeah, it's third party, you're going to pay a little premium, but you just buy a little module, you snap it in, you don't worry about it. That's a much better approach in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Console wars are here. We have enough information. Everybody can flame on about it if you want to. But the biggest thing to me is it's going to be down to ray tracing. That's going to be the key feature this year. You know, NVIDIA's been pushing it. AMD's going to start pushing it with RDNA 2. Microsoft's pushing it. Sony's the only one that's not pushing it. Well, and Nintendo, but we kind of discount them anyway. If Sony's going to be left out of the cold there, you're going to have Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, and Microsoft pushing this technology. I think that might be a real problem. Now, perhaps they'll find a way to make it work with the hardware that they have, but like I said, I'm just going off of Mark's personal demeanor when he was talking about it. He was very dismissive and always mentioned you don't have to use ray tracing every time he brought it up. So that's a big tell to me. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. Please share with friends. That really does help me out. If you want to help support the channel, you can become a patron, have a chat with me on Discord about this. And that's all I have for today. And I will catch you guys in the next video.